The ban list in EDH is one of major controversy and opinions. Some players feel it is essential and should continue to revolve around the current EDH meta, while others may view it as a barrier for new and old players alike. Today we will not praise or criticize the list. In our episode of How to EDH, we will take a look at 5 banned cards and ways we can fix them to being unbanned and playable again. We will stay true to the original functions of each card and try not to change its playstyle while we adjust its power level. If you enjoy the video and want to see more banned cards fixed, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. If you also plan to purchase any Magic related products, consider using our TCG Player affiliate link below to support the channel. The first card on our repair list is one of mass value, Prophet of Crufix. This 5 CMC Simic creature untaps all lands and creatures you control during each other player's untap step. It also allows you to cast creature cards at flash speed. This powerhouse of a card is essentially a Seedborn Muse and Vidalcan Ori combined. For creature decks, it virtually gives you an extra 3 turns to play out all of your creatures in hand and resolve whatever cast or ETB effects you may have. The card is just straight up busted and needs a good tuning. My initial thought for this card was to have it gain a line of text that reads, "You may only cast 1 creature per turn." This allows Prophet of Crufix to function as it originally was intended and still be a very strong and useful addition to any Simic deck, while giving it a major barricade. 1 creature per turn is only 4 creatures a turn cycle that doesn't allow the major explosiveness that the card wants. But another alternative for the card is to give it a Wilderness Reclamation effect. Instead of untapping lands and creatures on each player's turns, how about a one-time untap effect on our end step? This still leaves Prophet of Crufix in a really strong position, but is no longer outright broken in what can be seen as infinite mana to your opponents. Prophet, you have been fixed. But if you disagree, I'm eager to hear your interpretations. Next, I want to look at Paradox Engine, my sweet Paradox Engine. While not outright winning you games on the spot, this massive tempo card allowed you to make huge plays and long turns by pairing it with a couple mana rocks and cantrips or any other way to draw from casting your cards. It was a literal machine that put in so much work in my Kess Spellslinger deck, making me a ton of mana and my opponents hate me. It's without a doubt that this 5 CMC artifact needs some adjusting because untapping all non-land permanents whenever you cast a spell has been proven to be too strong. The first method to weakening this card was to have its ability trigger less or come with a cost. One example could be to make it a tap effect, where we must tap Paradox Engine and in return the next time we cast a spell, we get to untap all other non-land permanents we control. This keeps Paradox Engine as an extremely strong card, especially if we pair it with any cards that untap our artifacts. We've just made it require more steps to truly pop off with the card. Another and albeit lazy way to weaken Paradox Engine is to give it a line of text that says, "This effect only triggers once per turn." This nearly stops any attempt to try and get infinite untaps. However, something like Strionic Resonator would make that problem go away by simply copying the effect as many times as you like. Again, that isn't a huge deal since you could already have done that with the card and need a lot of setup to do so. An interesting suggestion I received from Reddit was to limit the amount of permanents Paradox Engine could untap. Instead of simply untapping all non-land permanents, what if the card read, whenever you cast a spell, untap X non-land permanents, where X is the CMC of that spell? This still keeps the card strong with a minor drawback. Paradox Engine is just one of those cards that are hard to make bad, so I'm interested to hear how you would alter the card. Next up is a brutal commander that will have you exiled from your playgroup. Braid's Cabal Minion is a 4 CMC mono black commander that forces each player to sacrifice an artifact, creature, or land on each of that player's upkeeps. The issue with Braids is that it completely puts a halt to the game, especially when players were getting it out on turn 1 and 2. The forced land sacrifice made it to where you simply could not play the game if you had no sack fodder on board. However, I believe Braids can receive salvation. There is a path to restoration by simply switching the word land with enchantment on its upkeep triggers. Braids will still force you to sack one of the listed permanents, but by removing lands from its line of text, you are able to have mana to draw into an answer for the commander. It no longer boxes you out of games and lets you hold up mana and come together as a group. Braids, you have been fixed. I'll have to be honest, I didn't know Time Vault was a magic card, and I'm glad I've never experienced playing against it. This 2 mana artifact looks like a real pain. It enters tapped and does not untap on your untap step. If you would begin your turn, you can skip that turn to untap Time Vault. Now you do this because Time Vault may tap itself, so you can take an extra turn after this one. Now this is just an insanely broken card, especially because extra turns stack, and if you have a card that untaps artifacts, then you could just take infinite turns. However, I believe I have found some ways to mitigate the damage that Time Vault will inevitably cause in your pods of EDH. My first and needed fix to Time Vault is to have its tap effect only be able to activate once per turn. Not being able to abuse the extra turn effect multiple times allows you to take only one calculated extra turn to try and stop an opponent. However, we then run into the issue of just untapping it on those extra turns, so another line of text is required. In addition to only being able to activate once a turn, we must add that Time Vault cannot be activated during extra turns and may only be activated at sorcery speed. I'm sorry, but Time Vault is plain out broken and needs 3 lines of additional text to even try and make it playable. We could just add that Time Vault exiles itself upon activation, but I think that's too far of a change as the card wants us to sacrifice turns in order to set up a 2-turn play. Lastly, we can give Time Vault Shroud. This would not allow us to untap it with cards like Manifold Key and may actually be played the way it was intended. Overall, I think our changes only put a dent in the onslaught of issues that come with Time Vault, but Shroud may be the answer. Comment below if you think more of a change like having the card exile itself is needed. The last card for today that needs a fixing is the infamous Recurring Nightmare. For 3 mana, you not only get some sick art, but an enchantment that continuously recurs creatures from your graveyard and has built-in protection. At first glance, it may be easy to overlook why this card is banned, but after I explain how priority works and its downside of returning the enchantment to hand, you will soon realize how broken this card is. Recurring Nightmare lets you return a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. The cost for this effect is to sacrifice a creature and return Recurring Nightmare to hand. Now notice I said that returning Recurring Nightmare to hand is the cost to activate, not a trigger from activating. That means when you cast Recurring Nightmare, if no one has a counterspell, it enters the battlefield and you get priority to make a move. This means you can activate Recurring Nightmare by sacking a creature and returning it to hand, not giving anyone the chance to ever remove the enchantment with any removal spells. Then its effect goes onto the stack, finally giving the other players a chance to respond, but by then, the enchantment is safely in your hand. It's an odd interaction that turned what they thought was a downside to some of the best self-protection that we have ever seen on a card. A quick and only way I see fit to fixing Recurring Nightmare is to have the return to hand text be a triggered effect from activating, not the activation cost itself. That would then give your opponents the needed opportunity to respond to the enchantment, making Recurring Nightmare fixed. Now that's all the time we have for this episode of How to EDH. Be sure to leave your recommendations on how you would fix the listed cards, as I'm sure I've overlooked something. If you enjoyed the video and want me to fix more banned cards, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more EDH content. Bum, 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 bum.